Right, whoever else comes in, we'll let them in one by one. But welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for making time on a Sunday afternoon. That's when you know that you are here to make a change. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. For those who don't know me, my name's Stephanie, and we are hosting a circle. And we've been so lucky and fortunate that Swaady has said yes, and she'll be hosting and she'll be leading the circle for us today. And just a bit of background, some of us have been following Swaady weekly on her circles Saturdays, and she really brings people together, and we chat and we listen and we learn, and then we are able to vocalize things and ask questions without any judgment. And Swady's circle was the first one I went to that I didn't feel like life is going to, life is going to get me down and oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. It was a circle where I was like, okay, this is what's going on and this is what needs to happen. And I felt comfortable and I felt held. And I was like, okay, we need to get Swaady to chat with Yoga Life, because Yoga Life is also going through a big transformational phase at the moment. And we're doing baby steps, but what we're doing is going to last. So without further ado, I just want to introduce Swaady, who is an author. She's won multiple awards. She's an entrepreneur. She's a healer. She's a yoga instructor. I mean, she's so much more. And so thank you so much for being here, Swaady. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steph, and everyone, first for showing up on a Sunday. So I'm very grateful and for inviting me to join this circle. So what I would like to do, I guess we only have an hour. So I'm just going to start the circle, and then I'm going to do just a little bit of talking about the construct of racism, but I'm going to go a little bit fast so we can really open up for chat. So I'm not going to really go through all my slides in details, because the idea is just to give you directions where you can take notes maybe and think, okay, after I can go and look this up. But really what we want to do is have a conversation where you can ask and share, and we can all kind of contribute to this new world I guess we all want to see. So maybe what we can do is, can I share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me press that.
I think you need just to
there. I think I've just
enable. Okay, so okay, can everyone see?
Yes.
I'm just going to do it as a full screen. Okay, so you all can see? Yeah, good. Okay. So let me just, okay. So I'm just going to invite everyone to close your eyes and take deep breath in, deep breath out, and just find that place of stillness. And connection with all of us who are on this call. And we want to start by being grateful for the opportunity of togetherness. Thank you, technology that allows us to connect from different places, different time zones, and create this circle. We want to thank everyone and everything that has made it possible for us to be here today. We want to call onto all spirits, guides, ancestors, loved ones, to help us open our hearts as we connect with the purpose of healing and reconciliation and co-creating a world of racial harmony. And so the circle is open. So what I would like to share today is really three things. Relearn or learn, for some of us, the history of racism. And I'm just going to give some, key, maybe key information that you can research a little bit deeper and understand systemic racism and how we can engage in collective healing. What we're really dealing with, I think, at this point, and the opportunity that we have is to tackle systemic racism. So we're not talking about, the individual hatred, but how racism has been embedded in the system. And that's really what we're going to talk about, because I think with the George Floyd event, all of us came, I think it doesn't matter what color, country, everyone was really asking ourselves, how come this is still happening today? And I think there was also a sense of helplessness, that what is it that is allowing that? And I think it also prompted people around the world to look at what is happening in their own country. So I think as we're all witnessing what's happening in the US, because we're already united in the experience of the COVID, that unity created probably a little bit more care and concern, and also for us to look at our own house. And so it is my belief, and I guess for, I think that's probably in line with anyone who practices yoga, is understanding that we're all co-creators of the reality. So we're all responsible, even though we don't think we are responsible, we're actually all part of one puzzle, and every piece actually creates the puzzle. And I think in a way that's good news, because it means that each one of us can make change. Because sometimes we look at things and they seem so big and we're thinking, wow, how are we going to change regulations? How are we going to change people? How did we end up having these leaders, politicians, business people? I think with the COVID as well, a lot of us felt overwhelmed with the information that was out there. And I think the good news is that we actually, each one of us, are responsible for what we are experiencing. So we actually have some power to change. And as more of us, really realize that we have this power, we can actually make change. I'm of the school that we have some programs that we're running. And I believe that some of us are running with oppressor programs and oppressed, and actually our roles vary. We're not always the oppressor, and we're not always the oppressed. I think we could be in a racial context seen as carrying the oppressor programming and some other people carrying the oppressed. But when we're looking at patriarchy, we could be the oppressed and someone is running the oppressor, etc. So, these things actually are complex and their overlap. And I find that sometimes in trying to simplify the situations of the world, we actually are not able to address them properly. So what I wanted to start with is just talk about some of the key, I think maybe we need just a person to mute. Okay, I'll go.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So just, and I have to say these things myself, I had to, I have to mention that I was born, my father was one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party in the US, and I don't know how familiar you are with that. And he has been part of that movement. So I was born into really, not understanding, but I mean, the history of race and racism, etc., has been something that I was really born into. Just having that as the backdrop of my family story and upbringing. But even with that, at this point of time, I had to take a step back and think, okay, let me re-understand what's going on, and make sure that I you know, maybe there's some things, for sure there's some things that I don't know. And I think that's one of the first thing, and yesterday Annette said it on the call, I think we all need to have a really humble approach to these issues and really question if we really understand them. So if we think of race, it's been defined as this way of categorizing people. So according to race, if you look at this picture, all of the people on the first line would be categorized as Black, and all the people on the second line would be categorized as white, right? But in reality, all of these people do have at least one Black parent. And this, you know, I didn't share pictures of my family, but I come from a mixed race family, and literally I have everything. I have blonde, blue eyes. I have dark, I have all in my family, and everyone has Black blood. And so the one thing that I think we also have to be careful of is that sometimes we may think even people are white when they're actually not. And I've seen that before, and I'll just share a story that happened like many years ago. I was in Paris with one of my cousins, and my cousins, so there are three sisters, and because we're very mixed in my family, we literally have every continent. Out of the three sisters, same father, same mother. The one is fully white. The second one is more mixed race with like curly hair. And the third one is Indian looking, because in their family, she's fully Indian looking. She could come from Kerala. You wouldn't even know that she has Black or white blood. And so I remember I was with my cousin, who's basically actually looks like the lady at the bottom right. And we're in the bus in Paris, and the lady, a lady, I don't know, like pushed her or something. And literally my cousin was screaming at the lady saying, "You're racist." And I mean, my cousin is white looking, right? I mean, I'm talking times where we're a teenager. And it was so hilarious because literally the woman was looking at my cousin and was like, you know, and she was saying, you know, that's how you treat Black people, da da da. And I'm like, you know, I mean, you're actually so I mean, the reason I'm sharing that, it was a silly event, but to you know, I always remind people that when you look at people, you actually do not know where they come from. Yeah, and so I think that's the first thing we have to be really careful. Like, people also ask me when I say, you know, I'm half French, people would say, well, from which African country? Because in their mind is that I must come from a French-speaking African country, which is true too, but I also come from France. You know, my grandfather and grandmother, you know, were French. And on my dad's side, you know, I have a German also. So, you know, so you just don't know. And I think that's the first thing I have to say. We also have to become a little bit more sophisticated in our understanding of diversity, because the world is much more diverse than it was. And so, you know, people have tried to demonstrate, and I think this is information that we all know, and is that actually there's no gene that can identify groups. If you're, and again, I was sharing the stories of my cousins, if you were to look at their genetics, they share the same parents, but they came completely different. And that's the story of everyone in my family, as a matter of fact. And there's so many families like that as well. So I think the one thing that, and this talks about the conditioning of society, we really to have, and it doesn't matter what color you are, whether you're Black, white, yellow, green, red, I think it's something that all of us have to really have the discipline to say there is actually no biological validity of race, and not just as words, but that we start operating from that knowing. And I think that's work that is difficult because we live in a world where everything has been categorized in that way. I mean, you start to see people will make, you know, I remember in the past, there would be brands for Black hair and brands for you know, for people, for Black people, hair, you know, hair product, and for white people. But now with more diversity, you find that actually, you know, everything is completely mixed, you know. You have people with Black skin and straight hair, and people with white skin with curly hair, and so on. So I think it comes back again to say, that you know, what people in the past tried to identify, well, white people have straight hair and certain color of eyes, etc. You know, it does not even work, because you find people from all races with all kinds of hair, all kinds of features, etc. So how then did we move from race to racism? Because it started with that concept of race, and then it evolved into racism. So it is a pretty, it is a young, actually, concept. The concept of race only really appeared in the 15th century. And I think, as most people know or may not know, is that race was really, and racist ideas were really developed as economic tools. It was nothing that was biological. It was, at some point, you know, there was just a need to appropriate resources and secure labor. And so these concepts were put in place. One of the things that I want for all of us to imagine, we have to imagine that if you look at today how the world is organized, you know, with big corporations and, you know, oil industry and pharmaceuticals, etc. Within corporations, people are developing very sophisticated strategies to ensure that they remain leaders in their industry. So let's say if you are a pharmaceutical company, you would hire the best brains, you would actually develop, you would have a strategy department, and that strategy department is going to be in charge of developing strategies to ensure that your pharmaceutical company remains leader in the domain for many years to come. I used to work for General Electric and in strategy, and I was doing 25, 30 years strategic plans for the company. And so if now you imagine that in those days, what people were looking at were commodities, and then it was not like really today you have this, you know, these lands that you needed to plow or develop, etc. And so people started to think what is the best strategy to actually be the leader in cotton or the leader in maize, etc. And so that's how you start developing, I would say, Machiavellic ideas. Because I mean, even today, I mean, I was reading this week that KFC is going to is looking at doing the first 3D printed chicken nuggets, where the chickens are going to be completely done in labs. And so these ideas seem insane. And this is the same insanity that was used in those days to actually create race and racism, and basically find a way to legitimize it. So that racial view that was established in the times was, you know, establishing race as a reality when we know it's not true, that one person can be of one race, which we know it's also not true, that you can, you know, you can say, well, Black people are like this, you know, white people can't dance, Black people are good athletes. I mean, all these kinds of stereotypes that starts to be developed. And, you know, I mean, this is really complex, but obviously there is also a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, and also what people are allowed to do in epigenetics. I mean, there's a whole complexity that, you know, also creates supports, you know, certain stereotypes, but at the same time, we're always looking at what is going to justify those stereotypes versus looking at what actually invalidates those stereotypes. So why this is important is that we have to realize that since the 15th century, and I'm just going to, yeah, people who were the leaders of every, you know, every area would basically create material and all work towards demonstrating the validity of these ideas, putting them in writings, finding scientific, you know, theories to justify, etc., etc. And we know today that the same thing is done, you know. So even if we think of genetics, before, you know, the knowledge was that you inherit, you know, your genome is something that cannot be altered, and it is something that you inherit from your parents. and basically it's kind of almost you're doomed. And then later on we find with epigenetics that actually genes are much more related to lifestyles, thoughts, etc., than things that you fully inherit and cannot be transformed. And as a matter of fact, genes can be changed. And so we find that even today, people always find things to justify whatever it is that they want to demonstrate. So I think, you know, in talking about what are some of the things that within us we need to dismantle, we have to question everything. And we have to question our conditioning, because our conditioning is inherited from these ideas. And it doesn't matter the color you are, we're all living in the same world, and we've basically all been indoctrinated in a certain way. So, you know, the thing is that race is really a social and economic oppression system. It is not something that has any validity, and I think we have to remember, we really have to remember that. I found this this information that was really interesting, that even for slavery, it was one of it's the second biggest global criminal enterprise after drug trafficking, if we look at the history. So, you know, again, this concept has always been in place, and for different reasons, as you all start to investigate these, you know, why were Black enslaved? You know, for example, if you think of the US, people, I'll give you just a fact, why Native Americans were not enslaved versus Africans, for example. Well, you know, one of the things is that once you brought, once you've kidnapped and brought Africans to the US, where would they go away? They're not even on their land. Whereas if you're trying to enslave Native Americans, it is much more complicated because they are on their own land. So then what do you do to, and again, you know, we have to see how history repeats itself. Then once you've decided, okay, these are the resources and this is the vision of the world that is going to make sure that my company, you know, if I'm a slave trader, a cotton trader, whatever, I need to make sure that these are passed into laws. And the same thing happens today. We see that there are lobbies of the, you know, of the prison complex, of the even of weapons, army, etc. And all these lobbies are just trying to pass laws to ensure that these laws are going to ensure their long-term, I would say, dominance within an industry. So the same thing happened before. And we find, I think now, because everyone is much more involved, we're constantly checking at laws and thinking, oh, wow, you know, why, you know, if, again, you take the example of the US, it's like, why, you know, people don't understand why, you know, guns and things are still allowed, you know, when you're, you know, in most places actually in the world, you know, you're not allowed to have guns. But I mean, there is such a lobby of the industry that, you know, the laws can't be changed. And so that was the same 500 years ago, that to ensure that the oppression continues, it's been put into laws that we don't even see or know. And the other thing that we have to remember, and it's the same thing, again, I make these analogies with, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry, is that when it was conceived to last forever. Today, if you're talking to Pfizer or Monsanto, you know, they're not thinking that in 10 years they won't exist anymore. They're building their strategies to be there for the next 100 years. You know, they're investing in that way. And so we have and people have always been smart. We're not smarter today than, you know, we were 500 years ago. People, you know, had brains and they could think. And so they use, you know, that thinking to basically create this economic system of oppression. So, I mean, there is the Willie Lynch letter. Some people are saying it's fake or not. So anyway, I've put an intentionally question mark. I think, especially for us living in South Africa, we understand even with the system of apartheid, that these things were really thought through. It was not done, you know, in a way that was not, that was just random. But I think really what is most important, and I think for all of us who are part of the yoga community, is that it's really the trauma that is being perpetuated. But what I want to share is that that trauma is a trauma. First of all, we talk about the trauma for, and we'll talk more about that down. But the trauma is everyone, and it feeds on our collective wounds. And again, because we have to remember that so many people are mixed. I mean, I was actually, I have a friend who's doing a research in Cape Town, and demonstrated that 90% of actually Afrikaans people have black blood, because when the Dutch came to South Africa, they didn't come with the women. So, you know, the people continued. You know, what people also don't know, and that is not a fact that, that I think that's something people don't realize, is that black blood disappears very quickly. I see it in my family. You know, you 2 generations and it's fully gone. You can't even tell. If, again, I take the examples of my blonde, blue-eyed cousins. If you look at look at them, you wouldn't even think that they have a drop of black blood. Unless you go and meet the parents and check the family. So I think these are some of the things that we have to remember, and basically our wounds are all connected. So I'm just going to give you a few things, because the other thing that is important is that we as a collective are not going to be able to change things if we actually do not understand what it is that we want to change. And this is where the educational part is so important. It's just to assume that we don't know what we don't know. So we have to learn. So I'm going just to give a few words that you can write down and then look for yourself. So these are some of the terminology. And I'm going to share on both sides. So I'll start with the terminology that's associated with, so you have white supremacy, white privilege, white fragility, white exceptionalism, color blindness. I think color blindness is an interesting one, especially in our community, and white exceptionalism, because you know, most of us, you know, live in diverse communities. We have friends from all color, and we're just thinking, well, you know, I don't see color. I support Black people, have Black friends, or, you know, or Indians or whatever. And so I don't need to do the work. We all need to do the work. And again, you'll see after, the work is not just for white people, white skinned people, because I don't think there is a thing as white people, but white skinned people. White silence, white apathy, white censoring, cultural appropriation. And so for Black people, there is some also other things that we need to look into, is also vacant esteem, the internalized racism, the victim mentality. These are also some of the things that we need to look at and understand, because I think even though right now, the script may appear to be like, okay, the heroes are on one side and the other ones, you know, we're all in this together. So there's no hero and there's no, you know, criminal. We all have to do the work, like everyone, because we perpetuate that. And I want just to share that, talking about some of the wounds within the Black community. I mean, the skin bleaching industry, and it's not just the Black community. I'm here in Indonesia, and if you have been to India, you also see that all the ads, all the movies are showing light skin Indians or Indonesians. I mean, in Asia, you have bleaching and whitening creams. In countries like Korea, people are doing surgeries on their eyes. And then, you know, a lot of Afro people are relaxing their hair, you know, wearing weaves, etc. So these are some of the things that we also need to look into, the self-esteem, the internalized racism, and so on, and some of the contradictions that are also carried within our community. So at the end of the day, basically what happened is that with all this racial oppression, what we've done is that we've just entrenched racism into our structures and our institutions. We've also then these translated into disparities across all the quality of life indicators. And then we've just continued to intensify the traumas for both BIPOC and white-skinned people. The trauma is for everyone. There's no, I think, we have also this tendency to do a competition on who has been more traumatized and who suffers the most. I think this is a zero-sum game. At this point, that's not where we are. We're it's like, it's like when you're in a relationship, and I love Gandhi's Satyagraha philosophy, where he says, what if we were treating each other like we're family? So if the other is, let's say, you imagine that other race as your partner, your wife, your husband, you're not just going to say, well, it's your fault, I have nothing to do. You're in a relationship, so who's playing what and how are we going to solve it together? And that's really the approach. So how do we engage into that collective healing? Because I think this is really what we're all interested in. And so I think the healing, what is important is that the healing begins where the wound was made. We can't just brush over and just start here. And this is why, educating ourselves and really understanding the history of racism and all of that, how it is. And these are concepts that, I think have been demonstrated. People understand that, is that hurt people hurt people. And so if you take on one side, all of us, if I always say, as a person of a mixed race, I carry within me, the trauma of the oppressed, the trauma of the oppressor on various sides, and as a woman as well. But at the same time, then my experience on an everyday, I would say, would be more or less triggered by what my life is. So, for example, I grew up in West Africa, where everyone is black skin like me. So I have never been triggered by really racism, because I lived in a place where there was basically no racism. Everyone is black, from the from the person who sweeps in the street to the president. Everyone is black. So I never even thought that I didn't even think of color. And that gave me also that the confidence that I could be anything in the world. But at the same time, and I see it's very interesting because I'm half African American. And if I had been brought up, and sometimes, I think about that, I'm like, wow, I could have actually been brought up in the US. And even that thought brings tears to my eyes, because I was like, wow, if I had been brought up in a different society, the same me would have become a very different person. And so because we carry all these traumas within ourselves, the environment in which we operate would trigger different traumas. And so I think that is what we're talking about, perpetuating these cycles. So this is really the important part, I would say, and that's where, we're then going to go into our conversation, is these are really, and that's a framework that, I've borrowed from the restorative justice, but also racial healing. I'm a very strong advocate for restorative justice. I actually move a step more where I call it compassionate justice, because I don't think that we can isolate people from the context, and I don't believe in justice that isolate people, punish people, vilify people, etc. I think we just need, at this point of time, a little bit more compassion and care. And so how does that look like if we really want to heal? It's for everyone to uncover the history and just to have interest. And I've started doing my own research in my family to really, really dig deep. And for example, I'll share with you something that I've been challenging people with two things. The one thing is, in my African American, so I shared that my father is African American and also has German descent. What I found out is my great grandfather, who was Black American, married my great grandmother, who was German, during the times during the times when it was forbidden for actually Black and white people to marry. And so I've been questioning, and this was actually still during the times of slavery, as a matter of fact. And the one thing I question, and I've had this conversation with friends who are of African American descent, and I said, well, you know, there is a story that goes that every mixed person in the US is born out of rape. I know in my own family that that's not true, because my ancestors married, and my grandmother was raised by her own grandmother who was white, and it was not a case of the white owner raping the black the black slave, etc. Of course there is this story, but people are people. People fall in love, people have soul connections. You know, people have soul connections today. They had soul connections 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. You know, we understand that these things, soul connections are soul connections. It just doesn't matter. So there is a whole story, for example, in the US that has been created that, you know, Black people who are mixed, and by the way, that represents more than 50% of Americans in the US. If you look at most African Americans, most of them are actually lighter skinned, most of them are mixed. So what you're now saying is that, you know, what has been put into the psyche of people is you are descendant of rape. So imagine the trauma that creates, and this is actually false history. And so I've been starting to question, even in my own family, to say, guys, you know, I mean, if this happened in our own family, it means that it happened in a lot of other families. And also we just know that people fall in love. It doesn't matter where you are, what you do, what color you have. That's the history of the world. And so we have to start doing these investigations, which I'm busy with in my own family. So you can share the news stories and say, well, you know, that story that has been shared to basically perpetuate a certain agenda that we all understand is an economic and social concept of oppression is just not true. And to share, you know, that my friend in Cape Town was doing the research and now investigating what happened to all these Dutch people who came to South Africa without women. So who did they have children with? And she was sharing with me, she received, like, I mean, people just did not want to hear that. But these are the kind of things that we all need to do to understand where we come from, and not just like, because I hear, you know, some of my friends saying, well, you know, I'm, you know, 15 generation German. You know, everyone is German in my family. Well, I mean, is that really true? And what about beyond? So I think we need to do these investigations. And then obviously, you know, make real connections. A friend of mine was sharing, look at the 10 people who are the closest to you. If the 10 people who are the closest to you look like you, then, you know, you need to change that. And so I think we all need to make that effort to know the other and spend time, because in knowing, you know, it just creates new understanding. How do we work towards healing? And we can use different methods for that. There are so many. And I think, again, you know, there is intersectionality because we have so many layers of wounds to unpeel. You know, it's not just race, but it's again, you know, it's the masculine, the feminine. It's you know, it's so, you know, this connection with the earth. I mean, there's so many things that we just need to peel. But luckily, we're in times where all of that is made available, and through the internet as well, and so much we can explore. And then basically take action. And I think that's the other thing that it has to be our problem. I'm just going to go here. What it looks like. You know, it's really, we each have to consider that racism is our problem to solve. What am I doing every day, you know? And I think there are really two choices. Either we kind of continue life as it is, and basically we're also not being a good ancestor because our children, the children of our children, are just going to inherit from this, or we're just saying, you know what is it that I can do today? Can I start a circle with my friends? little things, but at least to do something and continuously. So this is, this is again what I wanted to share, that we really have to each challenge constantly our complicity. And again, it does not matter which color we are, color skin, because we are all carrying in some ways the traumas. We just have to decide, you know what, it's not easy work. It doesn't matter. The other thing is, I remember at the beginning of this journey, people were like, oh, and you've probably heard that, and something that actually I put there, but I don't agree with that. I actually need to remove it. There is something where people say, well, you don't have to educate white people. I mean, for me, I find this is divisive. It doesn't matter. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. No one has to tell you what to do. It's just follow your heart. And I think it's that connection. And we also have to be very careful of these packaged ideas that now, even with everything that's going on, that prepackaged ideas are being given within each community to say, well, this is how you should operate, and this is how, what you should do. I think what we should all do is we should all care, and really connect with our hearts and be humble and saying, how this is my problem and how I can dismantle it. So that's it. As Steph has said, and she's been there every week, we hold a weekly healing and reconciliation circle. We get various people to come and share. So we also not have one agenda, but just also it's good just to be exposed to different point of views, even if we don't agree with all of them. It's that diversity that brings the richness. And thank you.
Thank you, Swaady.
Good. So I tried to make it fast so we can have time to share. So let me put that, and then we can just go with the, yeah. So
Sure.
let me, okay. So
there we go.
I can stop sharing my screen.
There we go. Awesome. Swaady, you're so right about learning. It starts with us, the individual first, and going back into our lineage and learning more about us. Because when we learn more about ourselves and where we come from, we then can slowly start to unpack and learn about others. Because if we don't know where we come from, then how are we going to take in where other people come from? So I totally agree with you with that. And
you have to reject, the other thing that I want to say is you absolutely have to reject shame. Shame is not part of the program. I think you also have to be very, very confident that it doesn't matter whether, again, you're black or white, whatever color. I mean, we're not in the times of shame. Shame is just going to stifle, to freeze you. I mean, I believe that in love I trust, and I think that if you start shaming, you have to shaming yourself. So you have to think, what is it that you're really being triggered? It's maybe something else that you have to look into. But when these matters arise and these things that we want to change, and even people trying to put shame on you, just don't accept it.
No, I totally agree with you. I want to open up to anyone else. Do you guys have any questions or any comments or stories? Claire?
Hi. So it's quite interesting. Just to add on to a comment that you made about the South African history. My mom's a journalist and an author, and I used to take photographs back in the day, and I did a social history of the colored people in South Africa as a project with her. And we traveled up to the Northern Cape, and we took oral histories of what actually happened, which had never been captured before. And there are some of the most beautiful love stories that have come out of our communities. and like you said, I loved how you put it, you know, this thing of like the shame around, you know, the rapes, and yes, there was that stuff, but there's beautiful, beautiful love stories between, you know, the Dutch and the people that they met along the way. Yeah, I'd actually love to share a copy with you, Swaady. Maybe I can send it to you.
I'd love
Just
to.
the South African history is fascinating. So yeah, I love that, you know,
I'd
so
love
it's
to.
about soul and, you know, soul to soul as well. Just thought I wanted to share that because it's, yeah, I think it's really important to remember.
Yeah, you know, I mean, on the love part, I in so when Gandhi, again, I'm also being in South Africa and especially in Johannesburg, where the story of Gandhi is all over. I was reading actually Satyagraha, the book that Gandhi wrote explaining his philosophy, and people were challenging him and said, well, how, you know, Satyagraha is the truth force, the soul force, and it's based on this idea of love. So it's and the person was asking him, how do you know even that what you're you know, what you're trying to use works? And he responded, the mere fact that they're still humans today show that love always wins. Because if, you know, I mean, with the amount, I mean, even today when we hear even in the conspiracy theories and all of that, like we have the impression that the world is, and I don't like the word conspiracy anyway, I'll call seekers of alternative truth, because I think we also then so quick to dismiss all that. But, you know, there is truth everywhere, but most importantly, that people have been scheming for destructions forever, but still we're all here today. So that's what Gandhi was saying. He's saying the fact that we're here today shows that love wins. And I think we have to start finding those love stories, share them, and say no. No, that's not the story. Because I mean, with our pain bodies, we're like, now every story is like a trauma. But, you know, people also didn't know what they didn't know. They're also really beautiful things, you know, to share.
I
So yeah,
totally.
Claire, I would love your, yeah, what you
Well,
want
I'll
to
send a
send
copy.
me.
It'd be fascinating. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Saudi, how do you maybe propose that people start going into their history? You know I went on the same journey
Mm.
because I think it's so ordinary for us, you know, in my family, because we're so spread out. So it became automatic to want to go find out a bit more. But I find that maybe people don't know where to start with such a journey. So yeah, how would you propose people sort of start asking those questions and the right questions?
You know, I find it is, to be honest, it is a challenging one, because our, you know, there was also different times, you know, even I find with our own parents, my father, you know, who has an extraordinary life, even to get him to talk about his life was really challenging, because that's not also the culture of maybe our parents or grandparents. You know, it's not like us, where we're, you know, the kind of generation of social media and of communication and expression. So everyone wants to document everything. You know, it was much more difficult. I'm finding, you know, it's work that takes time. I mean, I have been on this journey, and even my family, for decades. Like now, for example, you know, I'm just even stuck where trying to find out where my great grandmother from Germany, where she came from in Germany. We just you know, we're like, she got to the US, and, you know, trying to find from different sources. But, you know, these things are challenging. And I have to say, I've just been praying, because I was like, God, you know, this is like, and I've been praying also my ancestors, like literally, I've been telling them, guys, you know, you've got to help here, because like, where am I going to find this information? And I have to say, I've had some really surprising stories. So on my dad's side, you know, the family name is Du Bois. I don't know if you guys heard of W.E.B. Du Bois.
Mm.
It's a very famous, you know, American icon. And so I wrote to the Du Bois. I mean, luckily, as I was searching or talking to someone and say, oh, do you know that there is a Du Bois ancestry association? So I found them. I wrote to them. I said, well, I'm a Du Bois. Can you do research? And someone responded and was interested and starting to do research because they knew how to research. And I just couldn't believe. And this woman, you know, that I've never met, don't know her, and her daughter just got really fascinated by my story. And just also because they liked investigating and just started helping. And these are some of the things, you know, and now I'm stuck and I'm just like praying. I'm like, guys, you know, where are you from? What do I need to know? But I think that's something we can all do, because we all know that the history that we've been taught in school and all of that, you know, is always like instrumentalized. Even, you know, I always say, like, even if you think today, like just today, everything that has happened in the world, what was happening in Korea today, most of us don't know. And so how does someone now just write a history book and just reduces it to like a certain worldview? And that's just not acceptable. And so I find that history has to be our own history. And what we're going to all find out is that individually, our own history has everything. You know, you'll find out that this ancestor you didn't know actually came from Pondicherry, India. You're like, really? You know? And so, you know, I feel that I do feel that we're the generation where, you know, we've just come to, and the generations that are coming after us, you can see in the little kids, they're just like different beings. We're here to shake the pot and say, like, you know, in love we trust.
Swaady, I so agree with you that it's a matter of like starting the conversation, starting the process of research. And if I read something so nice the other day, if you get stuck, don't give up, just take a break. So if you are going down your lineage and you're like, okay, I can't go any further, just give it a break. Give it a break, because something's going to lead you somewhere where you're going to find out more. Like Swaady said, praying to ancestors, and it's going to come. So take a break, and then, you know, I know the road will go to wherever it needs to lead you to.
I've been doing it since 1980.
Sure.
And I'm still on it. So
I asked another question, or was there somebody else in the queue? Okay, cool. So I was just wondering, so South Africa, like many countries, I'm sure, you know, because of apartheid, what's happened is that with racial differences, there's, you know, been opportunities on education and jobs. So obviously, you know, our people who don't have money are often people of color. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the most difficult things to shift people's perceptions. And we've had so many conversations around this as a, you know, as a group. And one of our instructors shared with us the other day, and she said, somebody was coming towards me asking for money, and like, she said, like, she had this fear reaction in her. And it's so horrible, the association of crime and the color of skin in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And I've got a 7-year-old boy, and I find it with him as well. It's a reflex that he has. I mean, I will, you know, I look at myself and, you know, perhaps it's a reflex I subconsciously have. Mm-hmm. And I find it devastating that we are so polarized, you know. And I suppose, you know, we can only do, sorry, I'm going to finish off now. We can only do as much as we can do. But we have the most amazing tool of a Yoga Life community. So you know, for me to go and like try and change that, you know, like education or poverty in South Africa, it just feels so big. So how, if we could ask you, how can you guide us to shift that stuff within our community through yoga?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing for me is a shift in perspective. And you know, I'm not going to offer a solution. I'm just going to share my own, you know, how I deal with, you know, how what's you know, how it works for me. First of all, you know, I do believe, and that's my own belief, that I do believe in the eternity of the soul. So I believe that as a soul, I've had many different experiences in different bodies, in different times, in different colors, you know, all of that. So I do see my own body as an outfit. It's not my identity, it's just an outfit. My identity really is my soul. And that soul is a soul that has connections that are much deeper than, you know, just the materiality of the world. And so for me, the first thing why I'm sharing that is this is how I show up in the world. And in showing up like that, then the second question I had to ask myself, because I was aware, or you know, of this, like from you know, I would say from some time. So you know, so I think it has informed a lot of the things that I've done and how anyway in general I show up in the world. Then the second question was, okay, in this lifetime, I chose this outfit. It is just an outfit. So because I chose this outfit, you know, my soul, my soul is dedicated to service. And I feel that in all lifetimes, this is what it is. It's dedicated to service and to really find this path back to fully embodying unconditional love, which is really, for me, this is the goal of my life, at least, and my lives, multiple of them. And so the first thing I had to question is like, okay, in this particular lifetime, I chose this black skin outfit. I chose to, you know, be born of a kind of, you know, extraordinary, you know, family history. You know, I've grown up privileged. And so I went to private school and blah, 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 blah. So all of that. So, but for me, I don't deserve, when I was a child, I always thought, you know, I didn't do anything to particularly deserve that. It's just that these are the conditions. Now, I chose these conditions for a reason, that is to serve. So what is the best way this outfit and this costume that I have can be used to serve? So for example, you know, in this case, if I see, let's say, you know, maybe a person begging in the street, or for example, even a racist person, you know, like even if you were to put me in a kind of neo-Nazi environment, and I've, you know, experienced, you know, people who were really aggressive, you know, I'm not going into this is my identity, you know, kind of, okay, I'm like, the other person may see my costume, but again, this is the best costume to go into the party. You know, and so which party am I in? I chose that the party I'm in and I'm always going into is the love party. So that's really what. And then even when, you know, I end up being in the hate party, I think that, okay, you know, I'm in the hate party because I have to turn the hate into love. And so what I mean by that is it's to really, you know, start kind of, for me, is a process of not identifying with what, you know, the way I look, you know, where I come from, what privilege I have. I'm very grateful. I went to the best schools. I had access to everything. I've traveled the world, but I've always seen it as, how does that serve my brothers and my sisters? You know, and then, you know, that's the best you can do. And I'm not doing it with feeling guilty because, you know, I'm privileged, because, you know, I don't, you know, I've done, it's undeserved. You know, I think I see that as grace. Whatever you receive is grace. You know, and whatever privilege that you've received is grace. It is unearned. You've just received it. To be born in a family, you know, I always say I'm very fortunate. I've been born in a family with a lot of love. Well, I mean, then because I've received so much love, I always tell my mother that unconditional love I received then allows me to give it. Because if I hadn't experienced it, then I wouldn't be able to give it. And so I take that grace and that gift that I received to share it. And so I would say in this example is that remember that everything is energy. So if you go with a fear energy, you may recreate the same thing. And sometimes it's like, okay, you know, you can actually change situations. And I'll share, you know, maybe just to give you an example. A few years ago, I landed in Paris and I got into a cab. And as soon as I got into the cab and I was on the highway, the taxi drivers started shouting at me. And I just couldn't believe it. And just because I had asked him, when I'm in a cab, I always wanted silence. In general, anyway, I like silence. So I asked him, would you mind turning off the radio? And then they started shouting at me and saying, yeah, this is how you are, Black people, white, Black women, and da, 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 and just screaming. And I was so shocked, and I remained very calm. And I was like, but why are you screaming? You know, I'm just asking you to, yeah, da, da, da. And anyway, he went on and on. And so I remained very calm. And then I told him, I said, you know, the reason I asked you to turn off the radio is because I've just landed in Paris because I'm going to the funeral of my father. And then he froze. He froze. He turned down the radio. And I just told him, I said, you don't know people's story. And in that case, it was actually not true. My father had already passed away 2 years before. But sometimes it was just the only way to make the connection. And at first I was like, okay, maybe I need to get off the car. I don't know what's going to happen to me. And we're on the highway, there was no way. And I was like, okay, I just need, this man is in a lot of pain. And that actually happened to me recently in Cape Town, as a matter of fact. And by the Uber driver started shouting at me and screaming and swearing. And I decided not to get off of his car. And between we're driving from the Vatican, as a matter of fact, to Clifton. And by the time we got there, he was crying. Just because that connection. And he ended up staying the whole day. He was like, I actually don't want to, I don't want to leave you. And it just drove me around the whole day. And I mean, this experience, actually, that time I had the other ones, also Uber drivers, same story. He ended up staying a full week with me in the end. Just, you know, I just said, okay, just come wherever. And because sometimes, you know, you just don't know the pain of people. And I find once you start connecting, you know, hurt people. And if you're really like sovereign in your own energy and really grounded in the love that is within you, you can really shift situations. Even the most, where you would think the most abusive, because I mean, literally by that Uber driver I was telling, when actually my friends were like, Swaady, we're 3 friends, and they're like, you need to actually cancel the Uber. And I said, no, I actually really needed to take that Uber. I was late. And then, you know, by the time this guy had told me his story, it was devastating. But all this anger he had was just because so much has happened to him. So I think, you know, even for your child is how do we start to connect with people's hearts? We reconnect with our own, and we're like, stay grounded, is like, you're a love warrior. Whatever it is like you're going to show up. And it's tough work. We're not always loving, but we need to have the intention and the commitment. It's like, okay, what am I going to do every day to bring more love in the world, to be more loving, and to transmute fear, pain, everything into love? And any gift that you have, how do you share? I think you start to be more connected. You don't even, you know, feel, I don't feel guilty. I'm just like, you know, whatever I have, I don't even own anyway, you know, meaning that, you know, this idea of ownership is just not for me to own. Everything is impermanence. Whatever has been given to me is to share in a way that makes sense, you know, without having the guilt. So if you are where you are and you have what you have, it's for a reason. Now, how do you use that to support your brothers and your sisters?
I think, thank you. That all resonated with me so much. And going back to what Claire said about how we react to people on the street who maybe approach us and ask for things. I know that I have days where I'm feeling happy and I'm feeling safe within myself, and I'm so open, and you know, I'll give them time and ask them, you know, whoever approaches me, and if I have something to give somebody, I will give it to them. And then there's other days where I personally am feeling angry or hurt, and I'll just be like, no, I don't have anything for you. And I actually experienced that the other day, where I was just obviously not in a good place in myself, and I just brushed this person away. And then afterwards I was like, I didn't even give that person my time. Like, maybe they were asking for directions, or so I think it's so true that hurt people, because I think if you're not feeling safe or supported within yourself, then you can't, you know, no matter what color they are. And I really felt that viscerally the other day, and I felt so bad. I just wanted to run after this person and be like, I'm so sorry, how can I help you? Which I didn't do. But I think it's so, I was like, okay, it's fine, you have that awareness, and that's I think the first step.
But you know what you could do? I mean, in cases like that, the one thing that we really have, you know, to the power of blessing. You know, blessing is just incredibly powerful. And I would recommend, if you haven't read, there is a book called The Art of Blessing by Pierre Pradevant. I'll send the information to Steph and she can share with you. And for example, actually that happened to me today. I was driving and I was going to quickly exchange something, and then a lady came to beg for something, and you know, I just told her, I don't have anything, but I bless you. And sometimes you just don't want, also, you know, sometimes I don't also give because you know, there are other ways you also don't want necessarily to perpetuate. So I always pray that I'm guided, that if someone needs something, then I would know, but in the worst case scenario, at least I give them blessings and I pray for them. And so, for example, Christy, in that case, you know, when, of course, everyone has their moment, but the one thing you can do is reconnect with that person and just, you know, say, you know, I bless you. I'm sorry. You can even do the Hawaiian, you know, opono practice and just say, you know, please forgive me. And, you know, I just hope that because we're all souls, we can connect at this level. And so sometimes it's not all physical, and maybe the help did not come physically from you, but your prayer enabled another miracle and blessing to come to this person. And I think that's the beauty of oneness, is that we can affect people's lives by the power of prayer. And we know that, I mean, if we understand, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the work of the Dr. Masaru Emoto with the memory of water, and just showing how much water carries memory. And we are water. We're made mostly of water. So that shows you the power of prayer, of blessings. And that is really, really powerful. When you think you can't do something, you actually can. And so, for example, what you could do as you're sharing this experience, maybe later, is just to connect with that person and just, you know, pray for that person, bless that person.
I love that idea, Swaady. That is such a beautiful idea. I find that I do that when I'm scrolling and I've got this terrible habit of going on to Daily Mail. And but then there are some really crazy, hurtful stories on there. And I just find myself closing my eyes, touching the story, and just sending blessings. And I've never heard this before. I've just done it because I'm like, I can't do anything. This is all I can do right now. This is what I'm just gonna send you the love. So it's so nice to hear you say that. It doesn't take much. It's just sending your blessings.
And it's so powerful. It's so powerful. You'll be surprised, and as you start to practice the art of blessing, you're actually going to see changes, even like immediately. Sometimes, someone who would scream at you, you just bless them, and then they will come back and say, I'm sorry. And you're like, I didn't even ask for sorry. But you find that actually that came and soothed whatever they had in their heart, and they didn't even know that it came from you.
Swaady, you spoke about how your privileges are a form of grace, and I, as a middle-aged white man in South Africa, kind of have a sense, and I feel it quite deeply, of my privilege as a source of incredible guilt that is kind of so built into the system that formed me and my parents, and has left us with the society that we still have today. That I kind of feel that my privilege is stuck in this kind of guilt swamp. And yeah, I kind of go around knowing that there's very little I can do about the way the world is, the way I've been formed over time. So what's kind of, I don't know, strategy can you give for somebody who lives with white guilt, is deeply aware of this kind of white privilege that is so pervasive? What strategy can one adopt?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's, I think the one thing is, for me, I have like unwavering trust in souls. And I trust that souls choose an experience that is perfect. And I trust that souls know. And so with that, if your soul chose this body, this experience, it knows why. It has nothing to do, again, sometimes we're attached to, of course, we all carrying trauma, but because, in certain cases, you're aware, and I would share, in my own family, I was made aware of trauma that came from one of my great grandmother. And for me was that, okay, so that trauma stops with me. And so I went on, almost now 15 years ago, to decide, okay, not only that trauma is going to stop with me, but also it's not going to affect anyone else in my family, and it's not going to be perpetuated into generations to come. And I feel that my soul chose this great grandmother and this experience. So actually, because I think my soul knew that I could make the change. And so I think you also have to trust your soul, that your soul chose this outfit, this costume, because your soul knows that you can make the change. And so you may have been, the fact that there is white guilt or so, this is not your identity, and I think anyone who's trying to, including yourself, you can't attach this to your identity, because actually that's how it is perpetuated. It becomes self-fulfilling, what you believe becomes. And so if you stop believing in this, and I think that's the courage that we all need, is just to look at society in the same way, you know, people are fighting for, you know, more sustainable solutions that are earth loving. It's because some people said, well, we don't believe in that anymore. It stops now. You know, we're not going to support this industry that is polluting, or this business that is, you know, and so your soul says it stops here, because the loving choice is not that one. And I think the same for you is that, well, okay, you know, it's important to understand your history, but not to carry shame, because you can make things stop here. And you can declare it. You know, the power, don't forget, in the same way blessings are important, the power of words. You know, you have sovereignty also in your words. And you can say, you know, that white shame stops now here. I am not carrying it. I am not. Because that's not who you are. And that's why you chose, maybe you chose this white costume because your soul has the power to say stop. So the next generations, your family, and people can heal. You'll be surprised how actually people say often, oh, you know, my family is in a certain way, you know, I can't change things. My experience has been that with consistency and dedication, you'll be amazed at the changes that you can do without even speaking sometimes to people, and just blessing, praying for them, and yourself showing up with that conviction. And even if no one around believes it, but you believe, that's how you make change. And if people want to put that guilt on you, it's like, no, I'm not carrying that guilt. You know, that's not mine. that's not mine. You know? And I know it's tough because we're in environments where, you know, there's so many wounds and unleashed pain bodies that, you know, we're kind of in a swamp, as you said, you know, but I do believe that it's a little bit like superheroes. You can create, you know, a light shield around you, and then basically go into the swamp and not sink. And so I think it needs for you to say no. And if you feel that you resonate with something, I would say just investigate, because maybe it has nothing to do with that. You know, sometimes I find, like, if I get triggered by, you know, race conversations, you know, I would just start thinking, okay, why am I getting frustrated? Why am I getting angry? You know, I mean, I know that this is not the, you know, this is not the way to go. So there is something else within me. So let me investigate what is really going on, because that's just a trigger. And yeah, I don't know if that helps, Keith. Yeah, trust your soul. I think that's really a message I want to share, is trust your soul and trust other people's soul. We all are empowered. No one is a victim. And we all chose these costumes. It's like play. But in that play, we can make change. Each one of us where we are.
Thank you, Swaady. And any other questions or thoughts from anyone else before we close the circle? Shantz?
Yeah, I just think what I picked up from hearing you share there, Swaady, about, and it just for Keith to put it kind of into perspective for what we as teachers are doing in the yoga room, is that we are doing our own work. We are doing our own practice. And in showing up in the yoga room as a teacher, doing my own work, that is going to resonate onto you as the student. Mm-hmm. So as an example, just to kind of put it into the different context, you carry on doing your work, your learning, your whatever your work, your self-work means to you. And that will have, whether you verbalize that with people in your immediate environment or not, that will have an effect on your environment from a real nervous system level as well. And it just, when I heard you say that, it really just highlighted that that's what we do as yoga teachers, specifically at Yoga Life, all of us, that's what we're doing. We're choosing to go down this path of self-inquiry and curiosity and, you know, all the stuff that comes with that. And that has a resonant effect on our students. And that's why, you know, for some of the students that are in this chat right now, that's part of the reason you guys keep coming back and feel safe to come back, is because we are doing that. And, you know, we're not walking into the studio every day saying, hey, I meditated for 20 minutes today and I'm doing all my work and this and that. But it's that nonverbal pickup and piece of safety that I think we can all take on as we do this work, you know, in life. I find that a lot of people are trying to impose this work on each other, or you're not doing this work right, or you're not doing it enough. And if we all just stand in our truth of how much we have the capacity to do in each moment, that will have a reverberating effect on the other people in our environment and that we're in relationship with, I think, as well.
And I agree. And I think when it comes to race, you know, racial transformation and harmony, I think it's just to be aware. And this is why I shared some of the language and some of the things. So, you know, it can start with really simple stuff, is whenever you're invited somewhere, whenever you're attending something, you know, is the place diverse? You know, and it's just bringing that awareness that the world is a diversity and it needs to represent diverse. So as you start even questioning and promoting, you'll seeing the change, and that's how we see changes. You know, people being safe, actually. But a lot of time, remember, you know, the white centering has made it that actually everything white is the norm. And so what happens is most people don't even realize that's what has been ingrained in the system, especially if you are benefiting unconsciously or consciously from it. You don't even think about it. But that's why, you know, the work, you know, and what the racial work that we're all interested in is, how do we become aware of that? And each time you're somewhere is questioned, you know, are there other people? Is there a diversity? Let's make the extra effort to make sure that there is more representation, whether it's women, men, LGBTQ plus, and so on. You know, it's just like really, it's just like a stand. It's like, what do you stand for? And then just as you show up doing that. And then, you know, as you do that, you're not even going to think about yourself anymore, you know, or even your identity, because, you know, you're just here to serve, basically. And that is just, you know, an outfit.
Thank you, Swaady.
Anyone else before we close the circle today? Okay.
Are you all yoga teachers on the call?
No, we have some students and some teachers. Yeah. So Pride is a student, Keith is a student, Lisa, who else? And then I think the rest of us are all teachers. Yeah. And Shay is going to be a teacher soon. Yeah.
So maybe, you know, some things also to think about, for example, you know, just ideas of diversity, maybe in your yoga studio. Do you have pictures of diverse yogis? Do you have books by diverse yogis? You know, little things like that. Maybe if I'm saying whatever, if you have shampoo in your bathroom, you know, do you think about having shampoo for people with Afro hair, as there is a majority of Afro people in South Africa? So little things like that, where, you know, it's basically care. So imagine, you know, you're receiving guests, and everyone is a guest, and your guests are from, you know, all the different people you have in South Africa, Indians, Afro, white, and all, you know, how do you make sure that every guest feels welcome and feels like, wow, okay, this place, you know, is a place that feels like home. You know, maybe even in the shop, you know, maybe you have also diverse representation of brands, maybe some, you know, some patterns and things. I mean, so it's those things, you know, that's how with little things you start bringing that diversity, and before you know it, yeah, everyone, you know, you'll see the change in people, and people you didn't even think about or knew existed will show up, and you'll be like, wow, okay, I didn't know there were all these people. Because maybe before there is just this idea that, you know, there is like a kind of more poor, non-white and rich white, and this is what it looks like. But, you know, it's actually much more diverse sometimes than we think. It's just that people hang out where they hang out. You know, do you have also diversity in your teachers, and maybe if even you're already full as teachers, maybe you invite guest teachers, you know. And I see that, for example, here in Bali, in the yoga studio where I go, where the owner invites always guests, teachers from different parts, from India, from all around. And so that brings also that diversity.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny you say that, because those are the phases we're slowly going to unroll at Yoga Life. The first up that's coming will be the yoga teacher training scholarship. Chantal heads that. So that's the first, that's in our first phase. Also in our first phase is education, which we are doing here with you, and self-education also with the teachers internally. And we also said once the studio is completely open, we do want new suppliers and people of color to supply their goods there. And it's like you said, it's like little things over time to create this community that we want authentically.
Yeah, and the diversity, I think it's important that it's just not black and white, but, you know, Indian and Asian, because I think that's also how you start diffusing. Because we also, you know, we've spoken about this polarization of the world. We also don't want to polarize. We just want to unite. There is everything, and so that's kind of, you know, we are the world kind of mindset we need to show up with. Yeah.
Would you like to close the circle for us?
Yeah, sure. As we close our eyes, and settle in everything that we've shared, new information, and it feels like, at least inside of me, it feels like lots of things have moved. And just finding that stillness and that gratitude for having chosen to be all of us together today, for creating, sharing, supporting one another, and just knowing that we're not on the journey alone, that we're supported, we're loved, and we're also on the right track. I just want to ask for a special grace as well, because we can ask anything. For all of us to feel that love, that oneness, and to be strengthened again and again into the work that we're doing, and to really be the agents of the change that we want to see, that we're inspired, divinely inspired, to show up as agents of love, agents of unity, agents of sisterhood, of brotherhood, of compassion, and really operate always from that stillness that is within us. We're grateful for this world that has already changed, because as we're declaring it, we're seeing the change. That although we're overwhelmed by negative news and things that may create distress, we're confident that love has already won, and love always wins, always. And we are already the change that we want to see. We ask for insights, courage, perseverance, wisdom, and all that is needed for us to walk that path and to inspire ourselves, others, and to continuously make the change within that translates into change without. And we're grateful for each one of us. We want to pray for the recovery of Chantal, that soon she can walk. And that also is a great reminder that we can't take anything for granted, that everything that we have is a gift that we received by grace to share with the world, and that we may use all those gifts for the best and the best service of our community. And we ask for protection, guidance, strength, and all we need, even the things that we don't know we need, that we may receive them in the secret of our hearts. And with that, I'm grateful to the Yoga Life, Steph, and everyone who has been part of organizing this, as this is a step for change. And with that, and blessings to all, we close the circle.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Swaady, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being a healer. Oh, she disappeared? Oh, thank you, everyone. I'm going to get her detail. If anyone wants more details from her or anything, please let me know. I know Chantal and Claire want to get a hold of her. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thank you. Have a lucky evening. Bye, everyone.